From the campus of Volunteer State Community College, this is Inside Politics.
Hi, I'm Nancy Hauskins. Welcome to another edition of Inside Politics. Early voting for the presidential primary in Tennessee will end on January 31st, with the primary set for Tuesday, February 5th. We are one of 24 states holding primaries and caucuses on what's become known as Super Duper Tuesday, all leading to the national party conventions later this year. Our guests with us here today to discuss the primaries and those conventions are two professors right here from Volunteer State Community College. Dr. Carole Bucy is a professor of history and has published numerous articles on Tennessee history. And Grady Eades is an assistant professor of history and teaches African American history. Thank you both for being here with us today.
Thank you for having us.
Well, let's start out just by talking about this very interesting season of politics. On the Democratic side of the presidential race, we have a very tight race with 2 or 3 people at the top of the heap. The Republican side, there seems to be no clear front runner among the strongest candidates. Let's start with the Democrats. What do you see as the main issues right now separating the candidates? Whoever wants to take that one.
Well, really, the main issue, which people don't really want to talk about, but who is the most apt to win in November, is the real issue that people in the state who are diehard Democrats are facing. Now, there's a wealth of opinion about that, but they look back at the party history and they've made so many mistakes going too far to the left in particular that they're looking for somebody who is going to win. And I would think that if a Democrat loses in November, no matter who the nominees are for both parties, that you're going to see a major restructuring of the Democratic Party in the years that follow. The economy is a big issue here, particularly in Sumner County and in this region. As you can see, a slight downturn has all sorts of ramifications for us. And then there is the war. How are these two things related? And the war is coming closer and closer to the lives of everyday voting Americans today, so I think there's more concern about that.
Grady, what do you think from the Republican side? Same issues?
No, different issues to some degree. Obviously, the economy is clearly important to everyone, but particularly in Tennessee, the issue of illegal immigration seems to be one of the hot topics right now, which threatens, from where I'm seeing, to split the party if they can't find some sort of middle ground on how to cover that particular issue.
What do you think about gender and race? You teach African American studies. This is the first time many people have said we have a very viable African American candidate. We have a woman. We have all kinds of different socioeconomic backgrounds involved. How much do you think all that's going to play into who ultimately wins the races?
Well, I would say that it actually matters a great deal already. On the largest level between Republicans and Democrats, what we've already seen and has been commented on at the debates is the fact that the Republicans have just been, again, the traditional white males, whereas the Democrats have had a little more diversity. So that plays into it. I've known lots of people already who are supporting Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama simply because this is a woman who is in the top position or an African American male. If you look at the Nevada turnouts for the primaries out there, we can already see where race and ethnicity are beginning to become an issue, where African Americans are voting in larger numbers for Barack Obama, but Latinos are voting more for Hillary Clinton. So race and gender, race and ethnicity particularly, are already beginning to show up as an issue.
As somebody who studies African American history, what do you think the difference is? Why has Barack Obama bridged something so many people have tried to in the past?
Well, I think it's actually the way that he is running the campaign, and that Barack Obama is running as just a man running for president who happens to be African American, as opposed to saying, I am an African American running for president, here are specific African American issues that I'm going to bring to the plate, which means he's able to cross the race boundary more easily than someone who specifically has race as an agenda item.
Carole, do you think Hillary Clinton would be in the position she's in right now had her husband not been president?
Well, that's always interesting to second guess who in a political family should have been running for office when, particularly here in Tennessee. I remember when Pauline Gore died, there was a lot of discussion that had it been a different time, she would have been a senator rather than her husband. But Mrs. Clinton certainly got a tremendous amount of visibility that she was not getting, and the personality of her husband is quite dynamic for good or for ill, and she is still living in quite a large shadow of Bill Clinton. And as the primary season continues to now stretch on, even Bill Clinton, who has so much popularity based a lot on his own charisma, he's beginning to wear thin on the voters. I was very interested in looking at how some of these Tennessee women are going to vote, where their support's going to be. Jane Eskin ran for governor in the Democratic primary several years ago against Ned McWhorter. She had a very strong campaign. She won, did not win, but she came close to beating McWhorter because she had the support of a lot of African Americans living in West Tennessee. So I thought that perhaps Jane Eskin would in fact support Barack Obama, but I was very interested when I drove by her house the other day to see that she had a very large Hillary sign in her front yard. I think the race issue will be a big issue in Tennessee, as much as we hate to think it's not, because there are a lot of white Southerners over the age of 65 who will turn out and vote, and they're just not ready for an African American. They haven't gotten beyond the 1960s. A woman is equally problematic. I think in the South it's going to be very hard for either of those candidates to carry any of the 11 states of the former Confederacy.
What do you think went wrong for Fred Thompson?
Well, I would suggest that what went wrong for Fred Thompson is he never looked like he was actually in the race. Several supporters of his that I have talked to wanted to vote for him. They liked what he stood for, but he never had the energy or the charisma to really get going. Now, I've heard it said that from his campaign, I believe, that part of their problem was that they got started late in the campaign season, and as a result, it was kind of like missing spring training. Since they didn't get the workout at the very beginning of it, they weren't ready. They were playing catch-up the rest of the time, and I think that's actually a pretty accurate description of what happened to him.
And you know, it really is kind of interesting to look back at the big splash he made when he threw his hat into the ring, because suddenly he's number 2 in the polls. All the Republicans are quaking in their boots. He's going to upset things, and it never materialized. After he announced, his numbers went down every time a poll was taken, I believe. So he wasn't able to really take some momentum he had when he made his announcement and move forward. Instead, they got bogged down in how are we going to have an office, who's going to be our spokesperson, what are our positions, and it never took off.
I would add real quick as an interesting side note that watching what happened with Thompson, I mean, if the spring training theory is right, there's still a lot of talk about Bloomberg in New York throwing his hat into the race, even this late in the game. So he would have to have a lot of energy, have to answered a lot of those questions before he even gets in, particularly with Super Tuesday right around the corner. He's really behind the curve if he were to decide to throw in at this stage.
And I think this is really an interesting year. You know, we look back in all of these years and when third-party candidates have arisen and have run and have just done enough damage to defeat somebody rather than win. But I think Americans are really across the country expressing dissatisfaction with the process. They feel that both parties have been taken over by the extremists of those parties. And isn't it interesting that the presidential preference primaries were created back originally in the progressive era to give the people more of a voice, and yet now here it is 2008 and the people feel they don't really have a voice, that things are being manipulated by extremists in both parties.
Definitely.
I was going to throw in that, isn't that part of the nature of primaries, though? That this is the big problem when you run something like this, is that it does give the people more voice, but since you're pandering to the party faithful, the primary season really is playing out to the extremists. And so whoever the extreme sides pick as their candidate, the candidate then has to make a rush toward the center to try and get everybody else, which creates really interesting problems for trying to bridge the gaps to be a viable candidate for all Americans as they run in the general election.